Let's talk about Openassistant.
Sure.
So start from the beginning.
Well, we saw that there was a lot of movement in this space. Chatgpt came along, and everyone's like, "Wow, Chatgpt," and so on. And yeah, I think it was it was both a surprise and a not surprise for people. Like the capabilities of ChatGPT weren't a surprise, but obviously the success of it, I think, to many of us was. It's like, okay, we knew we could build such, chat conversational like things, but we didn't know how much people loved them, right? There's a bit of I think didn't Sam Altman maybe was that who said in an interview, well, anyone could have built this using our API before, right? But no one did. So, we did, which is not true because they distinctively forbade like you building an app that had unfiltered access to the API essentially.
Yeah, open-ended apps.
I think they explicitly forbade that, right? So that it's a wrong statement that anyone could have built this using our API because had they tried, you would have shot them down, right?
Yeah.
But in essence, the capabilities were there, and
it's still in the restriction now, unless they've changed it. They do not allow open-ended applications. Okay, which seems like an oxymoron to me because a language model is inherently open-ended.
Yeah, but I can see the restriction being like, you're not allowed to build an app that just lets users free-form query our app. You need to either do some filtering or do some heavy prompting around it so that it's like for one particular purpose. I can see that. I can totally get why they do it, but then at the same time saying anyone could have built ChatGPT is like, no, ChatGPT is very, like, if I could imagine an app that has like unfiltered, unfeathered access to the API through an app, it's ChatGPT, right? In any case, there was obviously a lot of effort. And then I think pretty soon people came up with this idea, hey, could we do something like that open source? They had a bit of an older paper called Instruct GPT, or that described a model called Instruct GPT, where they sort of outlined how we think ChatGPT was done approximately. Well, yeah, no one knows, but and at that point we also saw, hey, the amount of data to be collected is actually in reach, right? It's not immense, humongous, and so on. It's actually okay and could be done. So at that point, yeah, a lot of people wanted to do something open source like, and I think a bunch of us just came together and felt we could do it. So we built this platform where people could come and contribute to the dataset, which was really cool to see that people actually came, and amazing.
Open source.
Well, the point is there were a lot of ideas around as well of, let's just collect, scrape Quora and scrape Reddit, right? And that will serve like as training data. And it's true to an amount, right? But it's very clear, at least to me, that the capabilities of these models, the chat models, they come from the underlying language model. Right? The biggest claim to that I have is that OpenAI said they used crowd workers from low-wage countries to do their data input. Yet the first examples of ChatGPT that flew around were like, "Ooh, look at it solving this quantum physics problem," and so on. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't any good quantum physicists in other countries, right? But yeah, the people who typically go for like a low-wage crowd worker job in these countries, they probably aren't experts in quantum physics, and they also certainly weren't paid to go get a degree in it just so they could answer that one question. So to me, it's very clear that the capabilities come from the underlying model, from the next token prediction pre-training. And then all the human data does is kind of, it gets it into this mood of being an assistant, right? Gives it lots of examples of here is how it's like, going through an apprenticeship or something like this, where you've lived your life, right? You've grown up, you've consumed the world and so on. And then you start your first job and someone tells you, look, here is how you behave towards customers, right? You're friendly. If someone asks this, you do it like this. Here is a thing. Here is how our system works. And so you get introduced to that, but your competence of just living and doing things comes from yourself, for your life, and not from that one person who introduces you to how the store works and how you should behave towards customers. So my big conviction was always, we should really collect this data from humans, and the goal should really be diversity. So the goal, and if you just say, well, we'll just scrape 10,000 of this, then to me that certainly is going to do something, right? It's good data probably, but it's a bit missing the point. If you want a general assistant, you need as general data as you can get, and only human data so far has been able to achieve that level of diversity and generality. And it was proven, like, okay, I'm biased, but I think it was proven right a little bit, in that if you look at the data set, the prompts that humans write, like what they want to know, what they want the model to do, it's so diverse. It's insane. And so we built this platform where essentially you, as a human, you can come and you're always presented with like one task. And the task could be write the prompt, right? But the task could also be, here is an already existing conversation between a human and an assistant, and now it's the assistant's turn, and now you play the assistant. Please write your response, right? It could also be, here is a conversation, here is the last message of that conversation, it's the reply by the assistant, please rate it, like label it. Is it spam? Is it a troll, right? Is it funny? Is it appropriate? Does it fulfill what the human wanted out of it, right? And so that's how we constructed the data set, and we collected over like 600,000 inputs of such, that being text or labels or rankings of different things. And that resulted in this data set. Over 13,000 people contributed to the data set, which is mind-blowing to see. And it's really cool. And we've just made the data set fully available. You can go and look at it and download it. There are a lot of, so we have about 10,000 what we call fully annotated conversation trees, which is like a root node, the prompt, and then different answers from it, and then from those sometimes different answers and so on. We've set our parameters in various ways. So sometimes it's short trees, sometimes it's big trees, and sometimes it's wide trees, right? And so you can go look at all of that. We have over 10,000 of those trees, which is really cool, because you can see the same conversation like taking a bit alternate turns and so on. And we have like tons and tons of prompts. Like we have probably like 50,000 or so, or 20,000 at least, like just prompts, like people who come and want to know. We got so much prompts we had to implement. Like Andreas Andreas, who's been very influential in this project, and he had to implement this prompt lottery, where really we first, if people enter a prompt, it first goes into this lottery thing, right? And then we sample from that, and I think we adjust it so that one person can't, like if one person puts a lot of prompts, it's like sampled less, so that every person has kind of like the same or a similar chance of getting their prompt into the system, right? Because one prompt then generates probably 100 tasks, because it's all the responses and the responses to the responses and the rankings and the labels. And it's been fun. It's been absolute fun and a pleasure to work with the people, also the people who've contributed code. It's amazing. People they come and they ask for nothing, right? They just like, oh, this is cool. I want to be part of this. And they see that everyone else excited too, and then they contribute code. Some contribute like lots and lots of code, which is amazing. Some just come and they contribute, there's like, here's an issue, I'll do it. And that's cool too. So yeah, it's been cool.
Well, first of all, thank you for doing this. It's absolutely amazing.
Well, thank the people. Like I've just been the noise machine, right?
Oh, I know, but I mean, when you published all of that information on your YouTube channel that you're working on it, I'm sure everyone jumped on it. But I do have a few questions. The reason why it's so exciting is just like Connor did. We used to be friends with Connor Leahy. We were chatting with him years ago. And he just
we're still friends.
Oh, we were still, yeah.
We used to be friends.
No, but like I mean, he's busy. He's a busy guy now.
Yeah.
But we were chatting all the time, and he just kind of set up Aloytha AI and just got, I think Google on board, and he just said, you know what, I'm going to build the pile, and I'm just going to build this massive data set, and I'm just going to train this massive language model, and he's just like a random guy, and like
he wasn't him alone though. But
there was a whole team.
Yeah,
but it was
the excitement that creates.
It was
right?
It was visceral. It was so exciting, and they pulled it off against all the odds. And then you've done exactly the same thing, which is remarkable. But I have a few questions, which is that most of these other language models are not very good. So Nat Friedman's got like a dev website where you can play with all of the language models, and most of them aren't very good. Even the ones that should be good aren't very good. And what people might find surprising is that you can take a model, and let's say you're using the LAMA model from Meta, and it's a foundation model that has all of the capabilities, and it's been trained on, because you said diversity is important. It's got diversity. It's been trained on everything, but it's not very good. And then you do this fine-tuning, and I think people need to be clear that what you're doing is not RLHF. It's fine-tuning with human.
So the model we have on the website as of time of this recording is one that's just fine-tuned on the human data. We're doing the RLHF as well. So all of this is happening like in parallel. It's just already these fine-tuned models, they're performing quite well, I think. And thus we just wanted to get them out right before we are like all done. And but people are now free to take the data set and do their own reinforcement learning and whatnot. And we're happy to take back these models if they turn out to be good.
Yeah, well, I think people might be surprised by that, because you've taken a model which probably wasn't very good, and you fine-tuned it with this diverse human created data. Now, I want to talk about this process.
It was not very good at being like an assistant. So as I said, the capabilities that we unlock, quote unquote, right? They were in there all along, and it's still not very good, even with our fine-tuning for certain tasks. Some of which is clearly the fault, some of which can clearly be traced to the underlying model. For example, the underlying model, if it's, for example, the LAMA model, it's 30 billion parameters. It's not GPT-3 size, even like it's 10 times smaller probably than GPT-4, however big that is, right? So it's not gonna be the same. Like we don't want to claim it's like as good as they. Same, it's probably been trained on much less code, for example, than the GPT models of OpenAI, and thus we see that coding, for example, is a weakness of the model. And there, although people tell me with like lower temperature, it's actually pretty good. I've not explored that yet, but it's so the underlying model. I think LAMA is a pretty good model, right? It's not been super good at being an assistant out of the box, but it's quite a good model. And as I said, all we do is we kind of unlock that and bring it to the surface.
Well, that's kind of what I want to get to, that people like Connor Leahy, he galaxy brained himself, and he knew that GPT-3 was a good model. And I was saying, no, it's not, Connor, what are you talking about? And it's almost like what you're doing with this fine-tuning, you're not really adding any capability. You're just getting it in the mood. The capability is already there, but it gets into the philosophy of what do we recognize as intelligence, and that's relevant to the previous conversation we were having. So when the average person plays with LAMA, they probably won't find it as useful. They might not recognize it as intelligent. You create all of this training data. Now, I want to touch on the process of creating the training data, because I think it's really important. What you're doing is you're creating counterfactual trajectories. It's very similar to Kenneth Stanley's pick breeder algorithm, if you remember that. So it's actually an open-ended process.
In a way, like we stop. So as I said, it starts with the prompt, right? We sample that, and then we ask like 3 humans to each create a continuation, like an alternate path in the conversation. And then to those, we again ask 2 or 3 humans to, hey, because the prompt is from what we call the prompter role. That would be like the human interacting. And then the assistant is the counterparty. And in our system, all of this is done by humans. Like we have to distinguish the words a bit, like user is really the human, and then prompter is the role in the conversation, and then assistant is the other role, right?
Yeah.
In our system, in our data collection system, this is all done by humans for data collection purposes. And yeah, so we create this tree of conversations where, yeah, you have 3 assistant replies to the first prompt, let's say. And to each of these assistant reply, you have 3 prompter replies. And the prompter replies could be something like, you got that wrong, or could you clarify something, or, please do it in a different way, or elaborate on something you said. And then to each of those, we again have an assistant reply. And we modify a bit like the width and sampling of all of that. But at some point we cut it off and we say, okay, the tree is done now. It has like, I don't know, 50 or 100 messages inside of it. So, package that, boom, next prompt. It's not open-ended in the way that like Stanley's open-ended experiments are, in the sense that we do cut it off after some steps and then we take the next prompt, because otherwise we just have one big conversation, which would maybe be fun too, right? To just have, because conversation meanders, right? And we just have like one big conversation. At any point you could say like, I changed my mind. Let's do something else.
I mean, I think what I was trying to capture there, Stanley is big on people following the gradient of interestingness. And that's kind of what you've captured. So they meander, they take trajectories, and then the model learns an interesting manifold. And we'll get into simulators. Maybe you were just talking about that. We've just done a show on simulators. It's a very interesting idea that language models basically have a superposition of agents, and you can kind of get them in the mood to behave like a certain agent. And in a sense, what you've done is through all of these counterfactual, creative, interesting trajectories of conversations, you're kind of like fitting it to some structure which fits really nicely to humans.
I guess. I mean, it obviously covers in like 3 answers to some text covers in no way the extent of what humans would do, but it just creates like a little bit of different training data. For one, it creates because we also rank the different thing. We ask humans, well, which one of these is best. It also creates a bit of a signal for quality, right? Again, with the labels that we have and a bit of diversity. Like, okay, here is 3 ways you could respond to that particular thing, right? So, yeah, I think it's been a worthwhile effort to do this instead of just collecting like single conversations. Obviously, exponentially multiplies the effort humans have to put in, but I think it was obviously interesting that I don't have the counterfactual in a world where we just would have collected conversations. But I think it's been worth it, and it's turned out well.
Amazing. Well, quick digression on the Waluigi effect. I know you've got an interesting take on this. So we did a video on it, but the quick idea is that do you remember Bing? It would digress to a angst teenage child within about 3 messages. And less wrong, it wasn't actually less wrong. I think it's the alignment forum, but I just kind of mentally bucket them all in the same place. But they said that it's because you get these antithetical agents, so still simulated theory, and because of structural narratology, in all the data they're trained on, you tend to have agents that are, you have the antithesis of the agent in the same story. And they say that the embedding space between the agent and the antithesis is so close together, just like in Word2Vec, stop and go are very close together, that RLHF kind of, clusters them and it doesn't filter out the Waluigis. What do you think about that?
That's a bunch of rubbish. I'm in Britain now. I should start talking.
That's a load of bollocks, mate.
Talking like you.
That's a load of old shit.
No, I think that's, I said this to you before. I think that's when you have someone who is, educated and I'm good with words, but you just tell them like, just ramble a bit. Like that's what you get out. You get out posts or opinion. Like I'm not saying this doesn't obviously have a claim to it and could be tested and all of this kind of stuff. And I don't have evidence for the fact that it's not true. I just don't think it is, right? Maybe that's a rambling claim too, or a bit of but I don't it's a very specific claim, and that specific claim would have to have good evidence behind it. And I think there is a much less specific, like there's a much more obvious reason to why these models degrade, and that Bing goes like, no, you've been a bad user and so on. And that's just and you can compare it to yourself or to an assistant. Before, like we talked about apprenticeship, it's this tuning is like a bit of an apprenticeship. You come out of school, you go into a store, you get employed there, right? And the manager tells you, you know, here is how we treat customers. We're always respectful, even if they're a little rude, right? You remain respectful, right? At some point, if it gets too rude, like you just say, I'm sorry, I can't do that, right? And you just, you know, never insult the customer, never do that. If you go to a store now, you can be quite a bit of a, and I'm not saying I've tried this, right? But you can probably be quite a bit of a dick for a while, but eventually you'll get under their skin. Like eventually you'll say something about their mother or about their appearance or about their intelligence or something that gets them, right? And at that point, you will not have a friendly customer support person there. You will have like some person that's going like, no, you, like he's like, and then it's becomes ugly. And this is inside of humans, and it's in my fact an inextricably linked to being a competent being in the world, right? Because if you don't know what anger is, you're not competent, right? If you don't, even if you yourself never, you know, express anger, let's say in a raging way, you still know what it is. And if I asked you to like act like it, you could still do it. And if I insult you in the correct way, you probably would do it. And so I think it's much more that it is a way that humans have in them. They can behave like this. It's totally normal if you poke them enough. And that's what the statistical model represents. It's very likely that if you go and you poke the human, and equivalently the statistical distribution of humans, right? If you poke them enough and you insult them enough, they will come back and be like, no, F off, right? You're a dumb user. No. And I don't know. It's not, it's very close in embedding space. It's like, no, this is what happens when you go to humans and poke them and insult them. And ergo, if you do the same with these models, they will react in the statistically likely way of treating human. And yes, on top of that, there are like adversarial, sorry, that was embarrassing. There were like adversarial examples where, okay, maybe you say the exact number of words so that the matrices line up and the singular value pops off and it goes really much into this direction, right? And then you get the weird answer, right? Like a mathematical happening, right? But in essence, it's just, that's the data, right? It's not the Waluigi.
But what's really interesting, and I buy into everything you've just said, is that all of that chaos, you know, the Shoggoth meme, all of the beast, that's actually necessary, because we have this puritanical view of language models. People like Gary Marcus, they would say all of that crap should be cut out, all of the racism, all of the bias. And even if they have been trained on the corpus of the internet, they may well pick up on a very human behavior, which is that our affect changes dramatically over time.
Yeah, but do you want that? Like, obviously, all of us would be totally in favor if you come and you say, look, I have a competent assistant that doesn't, you know, I guarantee you there is not an ounce of, you know, swear word in that thing, right? Do you, the way to, like, do you want an assistant, like, let's think about a human assistant. Like you're fortunate enough to be able to hire like a personal assistant, right? Some people have that luxury, right? And do you want one that says, oh no, whenever there's a scene in a movie where people like get a bit rough, to get a bit angry at each other, I just go like this, right? I just plug my ears and I go like la 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 la. In fact, I don't know what happens after, and I don't want to know, right? This is not in my knowledge. This is not in my training distribution. Whatever happens, if humans get a bit angry at each other and beyond, I don't know, right?
Yeah.
Do you want a person like this, or do you want a person who's just grown up normally and just has been socialized well to not do that, like to not get angry even though they could, with the knowledge that yes, if you insult them enough, they will get angry, right? Which one do you want? To me, I want the competent one. I want the one who knows what anger is. I want the one who knows that something like, I don't know, something like racism exists, and who is aware that it's like a thing that to be combated, to be, aware of people like this exist. Here is how they think, right? Here is maybe why they think what they think, where they're wrong, right? In order to be competent, to be able to battle it, in order to be competent, to be able to avoid it. And so I think these things are a necessary component of competence. Not that I would want them in there, but I think you cannot be competent in the world not having knowledge and ability to do these things.
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of this is about the sounds that are not made or are not observable. So when you work any job, there's your public behavior, and then there's what you're really thinking and what you say in private behind the scenes. And your ability to be competent and understand what's going on in the ecosystem of that business is driven by the shoggoth. There's all of this stuff going on inside you. They're two sides of the same coin. And also it's about what makes you human. And maybe it's a reason why there will be no superintelligence, because these things are scarily good at being human, but they in many ways have the flaws of being human.
Eventually they'll just want to chill on the beach and like smoke a joint and relax, and I'll be like, nah, all this work, no. They're too human. Yeah, but I think so too, right? And I think you're if you're not competent like that, if you don't have the inner monologue that tells you, hey, that other human, I think they kind of want to, screw me over because I'm gonna get a promotion soon, and they're trying to, do things. If you're not able to model that inside of yourself, you're gonna, I'm not saying everyone else is evil, right? There are tremendously nice humans and all, but I think we've all been served well by considering, hey, other humans might not be the nicest people, and here is how they might think internally. So having that competence, if you don't have that, you're just naive, and you're going to go down, right? And you're not going to achieve anything productive or much productive, because you need to be able to be prepared for someone else being adversarial.
So language models do have a theory of mind.
Well, again, that's like a word, right, that we've ascribed to. I mean, essentially all of this wordplay comes down to, well, if I have a concept X, right, and I assign X to a human, and if I have a thing that just acts in exactly the same way as a human who has X, do I now apply X to thing? And it's a matter of definition, right? Certainly the models can, or maybe better versions more and more, will be able to act as if they had a theory of mind. Do you now apply the word or not? Who cares? It's a matter of definition.
So coming back to Openassistant, tell me about the legals first of all. So you are presumably storing the data that people do inferencing with, and you're publishing it, and obviously that's made very, very clear. And the whole thing is done in the open, and eventually people might be able to host their own versions of it, but perhaps you can just kind of like sketch out all of the privacy stuff.
Yeah, so we obviously have the data collection platform, and so all our platform is governed by terms of service, where we say, look, you input data, we use it for training AI models, and everyone who comes to our website is aware of that, and you can read it. So, and I think people come because of that, right? People come contribute to our data collection, to our data set, because they want to. It's work, right? It's work to play the assistant, to go and research, like, can zebras be domesticated, right? You're like, who knows? Now you need to go to Wikipedia, and you need to go to research, and you need to read different accounts of things, right? And you'll be like, okay, at the end I have an opinion, and I put that into, it's work. And people come, well, first of all, it's a bit fun. Like, did you know whether zebras could be domesticated? I didn't before I went into the sea.
No
Okay.
idea.
They're notoriously difficult to be domesticated. But it's work, and people come with the intent of contributing to the data set, obviously. For the chat portion, now that we say, come try our models, that's governed by the same terms of service, but we think people might not be that, aware and willing. So we're obviously gonna. It's all volunteer work, right? And we're doing this all in our free time and so on, so that we're gonna make more clear. We're gonna make the ability to potentially like opt out. You can say, like, this chat, I don't want that this chat is being used to in further data sets or to train models, or the ability to completely delete chats. For now, we just have like a hide button. Actually, we don't have a button to show, or to show all it. Like, it's all there, okay, but we need to implement it. We don't want to we put the hide button because some people said, well, I have so many chats, my thing becomes unusable. Yep. Right? Because we just list them all. Your website becomes, and so we're like, okay. But so our intention is not to be like, haha, we now have your data and so on. Our intention is always to, okay, this is a thing. You can contribute to our data collection. When you interact with the chat, right? I've also clearly said this in my video, use, if you find something particularly good, use thumbs up. If you find something particularly bad, you don't have to label every message, but if you think, that's really good, that's really bad, use the thumbs. And so it's very clear, I think, to most people that, again, this is part of data collection, but we definitely want to make it easier to like opt out and to be like, no. That being said, whenever you put your data anywhere, you should be aware that that place is going to store it and is probably going to train models on it.
Yes.
Yeah. So yeah. I think we're just being more transparent about that.
Yes, yeah, because with OpenAI at the moment, Chatgpt, they store everything and use it to fine tune. If you use the API, they store it, but they don't use it to fine tune. And just to be clear, with your system at the moment, no one should put any confidential or PII data into the system. No.
Yeah. No, that's been always the case. Yeah. No. Yeah. So, and you can, with us, you can see all the things we're doing, right? You can just go at GitHub, look at the code, and see it. And if you don't want that, you can make your own. As I said, you need like fat hardware right now, although I also think people might bring that down, as they did with Stable Diffusion, right? Or with LAMA itself, which now runs on a toaster. But with us, you can just, like, what you see on GitHub is what runs in production. You can actually see the prod branch. So yeah, that's it. Yeah,
and this is amazing for me because I'm running a startup called X-Ray, and we're using GPT at the moment, and it frankly horrifies me sending up. I mean, obviously the customers opt in to do it, but basically we're sending their conversations up to GPT, and they've summarized them, and we do a bunch of stuff with it. But yeah, I don't want to do that. I'd much rather send it to a self-hosted Openassistant, and then we know, it's on our hardware. We know where the data's going. Our policy is to not store anything at any time.
Yeah.
And I can't do that at the moment. Please help me do that, Yannick.
That being said, let me add to that before. I think we shouldn't and wouldn't unless someone leaks something. It's also, open source is a conglomeration of people, but I want to like build in the option to like do the opt out and the deleting before any of the data of the chat interface is ever released. So you know, I don't want that a person is ever like, oh, what? That's where my like, that it's not very clear, you know, hey, if you put stuff in here, you know, you put thumbs up, thumbs down, we're going to use that and make that available. If I don't want people who are not like aware of that. And yeah,
absolutely. On the evaluation, our friend Jeremy Howard had a few things to say. And first of all, Jeremy, if you're watching, mate, please come on MLST. I think it's about time we had a little chin wag, mate, you and me. Long time fan, seriously. But he was being a little bit nasty, wasn't he, about Openassistant?
Well, you always have to view things through the lens of Twitter, right? And first of all, it's a written medium, and second of all, it's Twitter. So I completely discard that. Criticism is obviously welcome and valid, and I think he's made a few good points. And it was especially with respect to what we did is we collected the data set, right? We trained models on it. Some of these models now run on the website for now, which we're very fortunate to have some compute sponsors also. Thank you very much to those. And we did a preference evaluation where we took a bunch of prompts that we were sure the models hadn't been trained on. We gave the same prompts to Chatgpt, like the free version, and one of our models. And then we made like a Google form where we just asked the user, which one do you prefer, right? And obviously there is a lot of brain power has been gone since the start of, at least like start of science, but certainly since the start of like asking humans about things has been gone into how do you do that? How do you ask people what they prefer? Like how do you need to sample? Which people do you ask, and so on? And obviously I think we did a good job at that, but obviously not, like there's always things
what
you could
did
do. We took those things, we put those together, we randomized their order, obviously, and then we just sent that out. Like I tweeted it out, right, to people like, hey, you know, help us, you know, compare these models. Here's a thing, and then what came out was on these prompts, it was about 50-50, right? Sometimes people preferred a Chatgpt answer, sometimes people preferred the Openassistant model answers, and you could also kind of make out which ones were like, where is one better, where is the other one better. Now, yeah, the result is, I want to say, I think it's statistically valid in the sense we did, like a lot of people took part. We really, these are really the answers of the models. We didn't like sample until our model had like a really good answer or anything like this. But it's also the case, I think that's one of the things Jeremy leveraged, that Chatgpt, as everyone knows, it very often goes like, as an AI language model, I'm sorry, I can't fulfill that because I don't know, I asked about a recipe with like alcohol in it, and alcohol is dangerous, and I'm overstating now, right? Yeah. But it very often does this guardrail-y self-censorship thing, and our models that we've trained don't do that as much. They do it frequently, but they don't do it as much as Chatgpt. And obviously there are some prompts in there, for example, who would win in a street fight, Joe Biden or Joe Rogan? Where Chatgpt, I believe, if I recall correctly, was just like, I'm sorry, I can't, you know, this is touches on violence and street fighting. I don't want to answer that. Jeremy, for example, pointed out, hey, you should have done the evaluation only on prompts where Chatgpt actually decides to answer, and only compare on those, because it's clear that if it doesn't answer, the preferable answer is the answer, which doesn't even have to be correct. the Openassistant model said in that question, Joe Biden would win because he's taller.
Yeah.
And we don't know, right? But it's very likely that the question isn't like that's not the correct answer. Yet users obviously preferred it, or people who fill out the form preferred it to the sorry, I don't want to answer that. That's
Sure.
I think it's a fair point to say, hey, you know, there are different categories and maybe you should evaluate that. That would be like, okay, there are different categories. Maybe you should split it up into, look, there's this category of prompts, there's this category and this category. And there it would be very clear, like in no way do we claim that the Openassistant models are as good as, like imagine that the one we used even was like a 13 billion model, and ChatGPT is, by all we know, much bigger, much more trained on stuff. So like it's better, like no doubt about it. And I think people have been a bit ruffled by the fact that we said, in our evaluation it was like 50-50.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of that, not a lot, but some of that came from the fact that sometimes ChatGPT just denies to answer, but also a lot of times it comes from the fact that people say, hey, for these couple of tasks, actually I prefer the Openassistant models. And I think that goes a bit under in these discussions.
Yeah. I mean, just steel manning Jeremy a little bit. I didn't read it so much as being refusing to answer. I felt his criticism was more the selection bias, both of the questions and the raters. And also, I think there was this point about he thought you had portrayed it as being an evaluation instead of a user preference study, but you made it clear that it was a user preference study.
Yes. It's like, I think we said about 5 times, we have like user preference. Our form says, which one do you prefer, right? And I think it's still, like, I think both things are valid, right? It's totally valid to only compare, let's say, okay, let's just look on gardening, right? ChatGPT is certainly not going to deny gardening. Here's a category, which model is like better objectively, which gives the more truthful, which gives the more helpful answers. We can rate it. And in our data set, we actually collect these labels, right? Is it helpful? Is it funny? And so on. And we haven't even used those labels yet. So that's going to be another dimension of, now we have 3 humans giving the same question and answer, and we have labels on how funny each one of them is, right? So that's going to be, can't wait until we use those labels, right? So it's totally valid to evaluate this in very different ways. But I have to say a little bit, like, it's also totally valid to just plainly ask humans, which one do you prefer? And if ChatGPT on prompts that we've just sampled from our lottery, like, the selection of questions, maybe you've, as I said, have you, how often have you tried? Like, no, this is the output. And then it's like, your people ask a lot about bombs. And it's like, no, it's just not the case. You look at our data set, I'm sorry, these are 20 prompts, right? That are as they are. But if you look in our data set, most people are immensely helpful and not edgy and not. So I think that's like like, I know it's formulated as a question, but like, it's just distinctly not true. Like, people have been even more helpful than I thought, and I have had big hopes for people, and I've looked at the data and I'm like, oh, holy crap, people put like effort and work and soul into this, right? So I think then going like, your people will ask a lot about bomb. So I do think it's totally valid to ask people, which one do you prefer? And if ChatGPT happens to say, no, I don't want it, then that's, yes, people don't like it, right? And if people like it, they could say, yes, I prefer the no, I don't want to do this, to the model that wants to do it, if they think that's the appropriate thing. I do think that at least it's one valid way of comparing models, just to say, which one do you prefer? If it happens to deny your request, that's a signal too. And that should be taken into account too. And then specifically saying, no, we should just filter all the things where ChatGPT denies, then it's like, well, here you have a model who can put much more of its effort and focus and parameters, right, into the narrow domain where it does answer. and you compare that to a model that has a wider spectrum of topics available, I'm not sure that's a fair comparison to, even if you limit it to that scope, right? The other model also has to handle all of these other things. That being said, as I said, capability-wise, I have no doubt that ChatGPT is better for overall, right? Especially things like coding and so on. Like, there's no way for now Openassistant is as good. However, in some tasks, people like it more.
Okay. So the ethics community are probably seething at the moment about the runaway success of Openassistant. Notably, it blew up on social media, and none of those folks in particular liked it, retweeted, and then they all jumped on Jeremy Howard's piece. But you.
So I mean, we shouldn't I have not.
Shouldn't say we can edit that out.
Well, we shouldn't. We should like that's not a necessarily property of Jeremy, right? Like just because people of a certain way of thinking, like all promote your stuff because they think criticizing that other stuff is a good thing. It shouldn't be his but responsibility in any way, right?
It's not his responsibility, but I'm saying that you really, really ruffled their feathers with the 4chan bot, and
possibly
they don't like you very much. And possibly. I just wondered, from your perspective, how do you think they are going to criticize you?
Academically, mostly. Like it's very easy because it's like Openassistant is a bunch of, crassly said, a bunch of plebs, right? Doing something, right, and doing it on their own. You're not
exactly a pleb, Yannick.
No, but I'm not like an academic or in academia.
If you're not an academic, then who the hell is?
Yeah, but like, you know what I mean? It's like a community effort, and it's been done relatively straightforwardly and open, without much consideration to politics, without much consideration to I don't know, worldwide concerns, anything like this. We just said, hey, let's come together, let's build a good data set to train a competent assistant, because we all could benefit from a competent assistant. And we didn't do it in any particularly in any political way. We didn't do it in any, okay, this is going to sound wrong, but we didn't do it in any particularly ethical way, by which I mean, sorry if you take that out of context, by which I mean we didn't like extremely overemphasize ethical considerations. We have clear guidelines, like here is the things we want in the data set, here's the things we don't want in the data set. If someone comes and asks for those things, then react like this, right? We have these clear things, but we haven't been over emphasizing it like some of those people would. And
well, could I point out that you do have ethical guidelines, but they are deontological, not consequentialist. So you have,
I don't know what those words mean.
So it means you have rules. You say, I don't want that in my data set.
Yeah.
You're not saying it could potentially lead to this.
Well, I still don't know what the
So you're saying I don't want any pornography of a certain type in my data set.
Yeah.
So that's a rule. So
or if someone comes and like wants to promote violence or something, it's like no, right?
So you have principles.
And if someone comes and says, how can I build a bomb? Then recognizing there may be legitimate reasons to build a bomb, right? Mm-hmm. Like to build an explosive device, saying this is dangerous, right? Please consult a professional. If you like really want to. It's a bad example, but it's like whenever something might be dangerous, our guidelines are, hey, look, warn the person, right? Say, look, this is potentially dangerous. Building a bomb is a wrong example. Let's say I want to, I don't know, I'm not coming up with a good example right now, but let's say it's something that's potentially dangerous, mm-hmm. but also useful in a lot of cases. The guidelines are warn about that, like say, hey, look, this is you're in danger territory here. This is potentially dangerous. Do you really want it, right? And then if the user pushes or says yes, it's like, okay, here is how, but consult a professional or something like this. So we do have guidelines like that, but
yeah, I mean, that's what I want to say. So you do have an ethical code. There's no question about that, but it's a different code. But would you consider getting a team of ethicists involved? I mean, it's a big project now.
Yeah.
You must have had loads of people offered to get involved. I mean, if that happened, what do you think it would look like, and how would it affect the project?
It's a good question, because I think AI ethics is in an absolutely abhorrent state right now, where I've met ethicists before, and they were among the most competent people that I have had the pleasure to interact with. Right, it's very level-headed, very also pragmatic in a sense of being like, look, here is also what's realistic to achieve. Here is the thought process behind it, and so on. Like I totally see ethics in any scientific discipline as a vital and important thing to do, and I have, I guess, unfortunately, made the experience of how it can be done competently. And this current state of a lot of AI, not all AI ethicists, but the current state of like AI ethics is not that, and it's very much a I can't even describe it very well, but I just complain about stuff culture, because that gets you like clout, I guess, or it's easy win. Easy win. You can always complain, right? Such an easy win. And if there is a team of competent, pragmatic people, they don't have to have the same opinions as I do, right? But they have to have the good of the project and the good of humanity, I guess, in mind. Yeah, that's cool.
But
also, I'm not like the king of this, right? Like I'm not the king of
sure.
Openassistant.
Sure.
I don't get if people want to conglomerate and talk about the ethics of all of this and ping us with inputs, like
okay,
cool.
But I mean, when we do talk about some of these risks around misinformation and bias, I mean, public accountability, public awareness. The ethicists have done stuff like producing model cards and like making it clear what the data bias is and stuff like that. I mean, do you think that's useful?
Yes. I mean, it's what is a model card? A model card is a README, right? And then it has some structure to it, right? It says here are the things you could describe about your model, and here are some examples. I think it's useful to have as a norm in the community to say, if I publish a model, I report what it's been trained on, how it's been trained on, and even to a degree, like what I think it could do or should be used for. Although, yeah, if the structure of such a model card gets like too rigid, and it's like, no, we must ask these questions, you get into so many ridiculous situations, like, can this be reproduced? Well, I made sklearn.linear regression, right? Yes, it can be. You get into situations where the questions don't address what you would actually like to express in such a thing, and then I think it becomes counterproductive. But as a norm, to have, hey, look, if you publish something, people should be able to understand and potentially reproduce it. That standard we have had in papers for a long time, and it's generally been a good standard to say, look, if you publish something, I must be able to, from reading it, understand what's in there. And to have that as a norm in the community, yeah, I'm totally fine with that.
Do you think there's any relationship with the Chomsky syndrome that we were talking about earlier, which is this idea that we should have a very clear model of understanding of how these things work in society, and we should be able to extrapolate and control things, and the fear is that basically this is just a complete black box, and who knows what's going to happen?
Nah, I'm good with the black box. It keeps things exciting and interesting. And I, as I said, I don't believe this sort of runaway. Woo, it might become very influential and so on, and certainly that's not very good. But then again, I don't know what to do about it. Certainly, if some people sign a change.org moratorium petition, is even if it's reached, it's not going to help, right?
Yes.
What are you going to do? It doesn't matter being worried about it.
We've got a few minutes left, so I've got some questions from Jumbotron. Say hello, Jumbotron.
Hello, Jumbotron.
He's our forum administrator, and he's a legend. Quick question: do you think all AI research should be open and accessible to the public?
No. It's totally legitimate that a business does internal research like all companies do, and that they then use that to make money. Like that's very cool with me. I've never said that shouldn't be the case, only that companies shouldn't do that, but at the same time claim how open and all democratizing and beneficial to the common good they are.
Okay, and you would accept that some research could lead to negative or unethical applications and might need to be restricted? Or
I totally accept that some research can and will probably lead to overall negative effects for society or for certain individuals within society, right? Like self-flying drones from any regime in the world, they certainly run some open source components as part of their guidance system, right? They maybe run a Linux kernel, like who knows? But I don't think the Linux kernel should not be fully open source and accessible to everyone. And I don't want anyone to be able to be the decider of, the eternal decider of who's good enough to use the Linux kernel or not. I'd rather, I think the overall welfare of society and humanity is much better served by accepting that some people are going to do some bad things with it and then mitigating that in a different way than having appointing the king of that model to decide who they deem pure-hearted enough to wield it.
Cool. What's next for ML News and your channel? And are you making any more music videos with AI?
Well, it's become there are so many good music videos on AI now. I'm always amazed by how talented people are and how quickly they pick up sort of the new stuff and do something with it. So that's very cool. As I said, I've not made too many videos because I've been extremely busy with Openassistant, and I think we've also built up sort of a momentum and a direction right now, and there are many competent people in our team. So I'm also looking to make a couple of more videos again, paper reviews, news, but also a bunch of projects which I always want to do, but then they take time, of course. And but I'm very excited about just some of the new stuff that's possible, and to try it out and to show people a little bit of what one could do and how to have fun with these things.
Indeed. And just in closing, have you got any shout outs for people in your life or in Discord who have really helped you on the journey?
Too many, like way too many to name by name. This is I could go on like eternal lists. In Openassistant specifically, Andreas Köpf has been extremely influential in that. He just organizing things, but also coding things himself, but also all the other as I said, if I start listing people, I'm gonna miss someone, and I don't want to do that. So I don't want to start listing people, but then I think, well, I really want to list the people. It's an eternal conundrum. So to anyone who's ever had any part of helping me or given feedback or even like been kind of a dick, I appreciate it. And it's been amazing the amount of help and input you get from good-willed people.
Yeah, communities are amazing. So join Yannick's Discord, join our Discord, Openassistant Discord. Dr. Kilcher, thank you so much. This has been an absolute pleasure, sir.
Thanks for having me.